Earlier this week, Shaquille O'Neal was asked whether or not he believes Victor Wembanyama will become the most dominant player in NBA history, and this is what he had to say.
Wemby is a great player, but I don't really think you can be dominant when you shoot jumpers a lot. I think if he was an inside player at 7'5", the answer would be yes, but when you shoot jumpers, you're always going to go up and down.
So in this video, the question I want to answer is, does Wemby shoot too many outside jumpers? And we're going to try to figure that out by doing a deep dive on the stats and film. Now, when looking at Wemby's shooting spreads from his rookie year, over 44% of his total shots were outside jumpers, which is more than his overall attempts at the rim. Now, when comparing Wemby to your typical NBA player, he isn't really a high volume perimeter shooter, being in the 24th percentile for his total volume. But not every player's game is built the same. What works well for one guy may not be suitable for another. So I think we have to look at Victor's overall strengths and weaknesses on offense to really dictate where he should be doing most of his work, while keeping in mind that he's just 20 years old and he's still got plenty of time for development. Now overall, it's pretty safe to say that Victor does his most efficient work around the basket, where he shoots over 65% at the rim with a good amount of volume. Wemby right now is already the best above the rim lob threat in the NBA, where he simply got a vertical point that the defense can't reach. If he gets 2 feet inside the paint, all the passer has to do is put the ball up somewhere around the basket, which makes life pretty easy for San Antonio's guards. Notice how this lob is way off the mark, but Victor still has the ability to both snag this pass to then throw down this jam. And it doesn't really matter how the defense positions themselves. Wemby simply has too much verticality for them to deal with. And then on top of that height and reach, Victor also has pretty good stability in the air, where he can elevate through contact and still put up soft finishes. You'll see him here have 2 defenders draped all over him, and Victor still has the strength and touch to tip the ball with. And even if Victor initially catches on the floor, he pretty much always has the length to extend into a finish, where he can cover a ridiculous amount of ground with one stride. If the defense gives Victor any kind of airspace in front of the basket, it's pretty much a guaranteed dunk. And again, everything comes back to his cheat code length, where he can both cover a crazy amount of ground with these long strides and elevate over traffic. Now, the most underrated physical element in Wemby's game is going to be his mobility and coordination. It's freaky how well Victor can move for how big he is, where he can sprint out and fill lanes on the break, while aggressively cut into open space in the half court. You'll see him here sprinting and filling a lane on the break, and with his momentum pulling him downhill, Wemby has the control to lift up off 2 feet and perfectly time this lob. And again, that mobility plays a huge factor in the half court, where Victor has the speed to cut into open space, where his size and length can then simply take over. And Victor can also sharply change his cutting angle, being able to plant and change direction and maneuver himself behind the defense. Watch him here first shift up, as if he's sprinting into the screen, to then slam the brakes and cut back towards the basket. We'll see him make the same read here, where Victor again steps towards the ball as if he's setting the screen, to then again cut back towards the basket. So when throwing everything together from Victor's crazy height and reach, his control and touch in the air, plus his ability to cut and move on the floor, Wemby is easily the best play finisher in the NBA, where he's got the best physical build for playing above the rim, while also having the basketball feel to get himself to open spots. Now, if Victor catches on the floor without a clear window to elevate, he's also got a pretty good post game, where he's great at keeping the game simple by just catching and turning into open space. And that's all you really need when you have this kind of height and length. Watch him here catch with his back to the basket, to then take one dribble and turn into that space to his left. And Victor also puts that 8-foot wingspan to good use. We'll see him here catch and immediately turn over his right shoulder, to then extend the ball all the way around for this reverse layup. Notice how the Rockets on this play are going to send an extra defender towards the ball, but Wemby's able to use that alien leg reach to pick up with one hand and stretch all the way around for this dunk. This play here is pretty wild, where Jalen Williams on the ball does a good job of absorbing this initial bump and giving Chet Holmgren time to rotate down. And with one of the NBA's best rim protectors standing in front of him, Victor can still easily turn and score over him. And then on top of that height and length around the basket, Victor is also comfortable attacking off the dribble, where he's got the ability to catch and attack into open space. And when he's playing with some momentum downhill, Victor will put those long strides to good use. Watch him here catch on the short roll, to then take one dribble and hit the backline defense with his right-left Euro step. This move here is pretty crafty, where Victor's going to set up another Euro, but he reads this defender playing vertical. So in response, Wemby is going to sweep the ball low and bring it around for the soft bank shot. And then on top of all that, Wemby can also create these drives off a live dribble, being great at protecting the ball with his body and bumping his way towards the basket. Now coming into the league, many people thought that NBA strength would give Victor some problems. And while there may be some truth to that statement, I also think Wemby has pretty good overall stability with the ball. You'll see him here catch with Aaron Gordon guarding him one-on-one, and Victor from here has no problem bumping him back and chiseling his way towards the basket. This is also a great clip here, where Wemby catches at the top of the key, and he's going to attack and throw his shoulder into Holmgren's body, bouncing him underneath the basket and giving Victor a window to elevate. When attacking his man squared up, I also think Wemby has a pretty good first step. He obviously doesn't have Tyrese Maxey level quickness, but it's still enough to create angles against opposing big men. And along with that quickness, Victor also has a sticky handle, being able to comfortably throw combinations together to then explode into his drives. This is a slick move right here, where Wemby's going to slide the ball behind his back and lift his eyes up, which pulls his man out towards the three, creating this driving angle to his left. And while coming downhill, notice how Victor is going to pick up and veer into the defense's body, creating this finishing window to his left. So when looking at Wemby's physical tools and skill with his overall attacking game, it's pretty crazy how complete his game already is. He's the tallest and longest player in the NBA, he's got great touch around the rim, he's comfortable attacking off the dribble, and using his handle and strides to create finishing angles. Plus, I also think his overall strength is rapidly improving. But having said that, I still think Wemby has some room for improvement physically. There are times where the defense can get underneath him and push him out into more difficult finishes. And if Wemby does try to lower his shoulder to initiate contact, he does commonly lose his balance, which leads to him relying on his length and finishing in traffic, where instead of driving through the defense and creating scoring angles, he instead stretches out and tries to score around the defense, which can work in spots because he does have that ridiculous reach, but it's not always reliable. And that lack of strength also leads to Victor getting pushed out into these mid-range jumpers, where again his lack of physicality prevents him from attacking through the defense's frame, forcing him to rely on his length to shoot from over the top. And while Victor does have the size to easily get these shots off, he hasn't been an accurate shooter from these spots. Now mechanically, I do think Wemby has the foundation to steadily improve his numbers year after year, but I don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. Even if Victor takes a massive jump with his mid-range game and shoots over 45%, that's still nowhere near his efficiency around the basket. And I get that Victor should take a few of these shots to keep the defense honest, but overall, I don't think Victor should become a high-volume mid-range shooter. And last year, he did get in the habit of settling for these face-up jumpers, which right now aren't good looks for him, especially considering how elite he is around the basket. Even if the defense sags back and tries to funnel him into these pull-ups, Wemby still has the physical tools and skill to get into the paint. So specifically with Victor's mid-range game, I think these are shots he should be limiting. He's too good of a lob threat to be stopping short for jumpers as a roll man, and he's got too much individual skill and talent to settle for these less efficient looks in isolation. Now when extending out and looking at Victor's three-point shooting, things do get a little bit more complicated, because Wemby last year did have some real success from behind the line. Now Victor last year shot 38% on all his pull-ups, and to put that in perspective, that was higher than Kevin Durant, Devin Booker, and Kyrie Irving last year, who have all consistently been elite perimeter scorers. When shooting off the dribble, Victor gets great rhythm and flow into his jumper, where he's got no problem pulling up from range and punishing any kind of soft coverage. Victor overall really favors pulling up going left. Whether he's hitting your standard step back or some kind of float dribble, he's pretty much always drifting to his left. Watch him here transfer the ball through to then pound the ball and skate back to his left, and he's going to organize his feet into his pull-up. And on paper, many of these moves are pretty simple and straightforward, but it does take a lot of timing and coordination with the ball to effectively hit these moves while staying on balance. And generally speaking, that's why the best perimeter scorers are all typically smaller and more compact players. Guys like Steph, Dame, and Kyrie come to mind. And then of course there's been bigger wings who've also been top tier outside scorers. But once you get to about 6'10", it's almost impossible for a player to have the size, body control, and stability to be an elite 3-point shooter off the dribble. The only elite guy for me that comes to mind is Kevin Durant. And obviously his blend of skill, size, and shot making has made him an all-time great scorer. And when looking at Victor's balanced footwork and flow into his pull-ups, I do think he has the foundation to be an elite 3-point shooter off the dribble. And it gets really scary when you mix those skills in with his ridiculous size. Now, I still think Victor has some room for improvement with his overall accuracy. Even though his 3-point numbers off the dribble were solid, his percentages off the catch last year were low. And this is where the conversation gets a little bit more complicated, because Victor overall is a pretty high volume 3-point shooter, attempting 5.5 shots per game, which is more than any other center across the league. And the question is that too much? Because on one hand, Victor does have the potential to be a high level perimeter scorer, having both the tools in his game to effectively generate these looks, while already putting up some promising numbers. But on the other hand, Wemby is one of the best paint scorers across the league, and a case could be made that he should double down on that instead of hunting these looks from behind the line. And I'm honestly split on this issue. I think it's a bit too extreme for anybody to suggest that Wemby should just be a paint scorer, especially with the way the game is played today. If Victor can turn into a consistent 35 to 40% 3-point shooter, I think that's nothing but a plus. It adds some versatility to his game, allows him to space the floor, while also being able to punish the defense for sagging off him. But at the same time, I do think Victor hunts 3-point looks slightly too much. We already went over how effective Victor is as an above the rim lob threat, but throughout last year, there were many times where he elected to space to the 3 instead of flashing to the paint and using his drastic height advantage. And in pick and roll, the Spurs commonly use him as a pick and pop man. Now, I'm not sure if these are designed plays or Victor is making reads on the fly, but I think it's pretty safe to say that Wemby is going to do a lot more damage rolling towards the basket. When playing off the dribble, I also think Victor is slightly overeager to rise up into pull-up threes, especially when he pulls the opposing team center out to the perimeter. I think if Wemby has any big out guarding him in open space, that's a pretty clear advantage for him to attack. I think he's easily got the skill and control with the ball to break down slower footed bigs on the perimeter.
Wemby, another 3.
But overall, I still think Victor plays the game the right way. Pretty much all his shots come from him reading the defense. I think it's too early for me or anybody else to completely dictate where his offense should be coming from, because he's already got a versatile skill set, and he's most likely going to be making improvements down the road. But to answer the question of the video, does Victor Wembanyama shoot too many jumpers? The answer for me is yes, because Victor is already the best paint scorer in the NBA, and I don't think a player with his build and skill set should be shooting more threes than any other center across the league. I think Wemby should for sure take the open 3-point looks that come to him, but he's way too dominant in the paint to be actively seeking out perimeter jumpers. But that's just my opinion. I'd love to hear yours in the comments.